after 35, you're probably going to experience some perimenopausal symptoms. I didn't know that.
Reading every word in this book, it's almost like the book wrote itself, like this was already in you. You needed to get this out of you.
I had a real need because menopause hit me at such a young age. Quite instantly, I was told by my friends, "Oh, don't be silly, you're too young to be in menopause." And it just finally got too exhausting to carry that secret, that burden. If you Google the history of menopause, in Grecian times, they didn't know what to do with you. Once your, reproductive organs were no longer in use, you were going to be sent off to the asylum. And there's just no use for a woman in society like that if she's going to suddenly not be able to produce and she's behaving in ways that are mysterious. It's a patriarchal thing that still is there, and up to us, I think, to really break that down.
Hi, Naomi. How
Hello.
are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm just going to take my earrings off because I can hear them banging on my headphones.
It's the pits.
And that might be something annoying that you have to deal with too. So
It's so nice to see you. And first of all, congrats on this brilliant book, which I bloody loved. Not only did I love it, but I'm extremely proud that Happy Place Books is publishing it in the UK. I'm over the moon about that. So happy about it.
yay.
And the front cover.
Oh, good. Do you like it?
I love it.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's the best front
Yeah, I
cover.
wanted it to be bold. And it turns out that the old megaphone or bullhorn or whatever you call it, is sort of symbolic in my life, and consciously or not, it ended up on the cover of my book. But in David Lynch's passing, which just took place last week, I was reminded so much of his use of a megaphone all throughout his career. He would be on the set, and even if you were 3 feet in front of him, he would still speak with his megaphone. So it's clearly in me that as a symbolic thing. And I conjured it, and it's ended up in my book. And I didn't mean it just happened. I only thought of it as a connection as the other day when I heard the news.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear about the passing. I mean, he's such a great friend of yours, and obviously you work closely with him. You did that beautiful tribute online. It's just rough, isn't it? And it's hard to comprehend when someone's not here anymore, which is very odd.
Yeah, grief is a difficult thing, and another kind of conversation that needs to develop further. I think we need to understand it better, prepare for it better. But yeah, it was a very, very sad thing. But I am comforted by the joy, the outpouring of love people experienced through him, with him. And his humor, it just created so much joy in so many of us. So that's quite healing.
Yeah.
Every time you feel yourself falling to pieces, you find yourself laughing at some piece of footage that arrives in your feed, and just you laugh because he had a really, really fantastic life and affected many of us.
Yeah, an extraordinary man. Extraordinary man. Well, we love the megaphone and we love the front cover. But more importantly, I love the contents. And I'll tell you, there's many reasons why I love it. But one of them is actors of your caliber traditionally are sort of, I guess they make themselves seem otherworldly, almost inhuman, like they would not have any human bodily functions because they're sort of shiny Hollywood people over here. I sort of can't imagine Brad Pitt taking a shit kind of thing. But here you are talking about something so human and relatable and really bloody helpful. And it feels like reading every word in this book, it seemingly poured out of you, and is something that it's almost like the book wrote itself, like this was already in you. You needed to get this out of you and into the wider world.
Yeah, and I did oscillate back and forth, should I do this or not? In fact, the idea came to me because I wished there was such a book. I had a real need because menopause hit me at such a young age. When I was completely uneducated, completely at sea with no community, not knowing how to talk to doctors not really having a lot to say about it, symptoms going undiagnosed. And I said to a friend one day, God, there should be a book. I wish there was a book that had some kind of guide to make it, a little less horrific and maybe some fun there, like it's not the end. And my friend said, well, you should write that book. And I was like, no, 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 no way. And I'm an actor, not a writer. And you can't be saying that stuff out loud. God, no. So it took me, that was a good 10 years ago. But so that when you say it came pouring out of me, eventually it did. But it took a long time to get to that, and a lot of experiences to go through, a lot of knowledge to learn, people to speak to, and get their expertise, and fear to move through. Like I tested the waters here and there, first within my friend groups, and quite instantly I was told by my friends, oh, don't be silly, you're too young to be in menopause, or if I made a joke about an estrogen dip or something, that was like, oh, don't be silly. So I got so many versions of, no, I'm not willing to talk about it. No, that's not my experience. So I would retreat further and further into myself. And it just finally got too exhausting to carry that secret, that burden. And I just went, fuck it. If it spooks you, that's a bummer, but I need to do it for myself. And half the population is going to go through this. The chances are this story, my story, might be your story too, or a version of that can be tapped into through this. Yeah, through learning about mine.
You were also pretty much actively warned that talking about menopause or age in the context of Hollywood would be career suicide. But thank God you mitigated that and went still doing it.
Yeah. And again, I slowly did it. I created a company for skincare from scalp to vag. And I gently moved through that. I did not think that I would be the woman out there talking about, vagina over and over again, vaginas. But you can't do this in half measures. You've got to just blow through all of the awkwardness of it in the hope that it will be of service to others.
And I mean, we're so awkward talking about sexual health, vaginas. Like we're older women, and we're still like, oh, vagina. It's kind of this awkward thing, and it's like, oh my God, we need to just. I mean, I'm sure there are younger generations who are naturally feeling slightly more comfortable talking about this stuff, but I think our generations, we're sort of it's awkward.
Yes, and our mother's generation, are not too thrilled with it either, because they had to suffer through.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Some are like, yeah, wow, that's it, fantastic, you did it. And some are like, really? Do you really need to do that? So, or I sailed through it. It was fine. What are you all carrying on about? It's interesting. It does bring up intergenerational stories, but I think the millennials who are just edging into menopause now, or perimenopause, are grateful, and I think the generation behind them are going to be as well. Like the ice is broken. We're much more free to talk about it, and so obviously research, funding, education is all going to be for the better.
Yeah, I mean, I am peak demographic because my mum sort of normally with anything goes, oh, I don't remember, I don't remember. Like, oh, mum, what about childbirth? I don't remember. She's literally told me nothing. But then she did say not long ago that she went through menopause at 42. I am now past that age and have slightly buried my head in the sand like many of my friends and just gone, la, 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 I don't want to think about it. Is that a symptom? Is it not? I'm not really paying any of it any attention. So this came to me at the exact right time. I needed this for not only the anecdotal reassurance, but also the deep dive stats you've got in there, and looking at misinformation and skirting around that and getting to the crux of things. It's something that we're still, I think, certainly me and my friends are just feeling a bit lost in and unsure about. And like you say, it's going to happen to half the population, and it can be a pretty major thing. I mean, you started getting symptoms at 36, and I mean, this was a really tricky time for you because
Well,
you
actually,
were... Oh, go on. Even before.
Sorry, even before, but they were discounted. Like I remember every movie we do as actors, we have to tick a list of questions for the medical and insurance purposes. And I would always tick night sweats. I knew that my periods were becoming irregular, closer together, much lighter. Didn't know that that meant menopause. I did have a conversation with my mum about menopause long, long ago, and she had told me that she went in at 45. I didn't know any other detail around it. Didn't know she had a multitude of symptoms and for a great number of years. So yeah, and when I got that diagnosis or semi-diagnosis, right at the precipice when I was trying to get pregnant, and my doctor said, well, the reason you're not is probably because you're close to menopause. These blood results are suggesting as such. And I was like, what? I remember 45 for my mom. I'm 36. And I called her right away and I said, why didn't you tell me more? And she said, well, these were the conversations I didn't have with you because my mother never had them with me. So no blame to her. It's just, that was the societal message that women must, zip it and grin and bear it.
Yeah, I mean, you
and
talk
not
about...
get the treatment.
Yes.
God.
Well, you talk about this in the book, that there is perhaps this sort of subconscious undercurrent understanding that women just will suffer from the moment we start our periods until the end of time. There is suffering and pain and this monthly cycle that rules so much of our lives, that therefore you do just troop on and you get through it. And that is one of the factors as to why we haven't talked about it and why it's a really new conversation. I mean, here in the UK, I'd say maybe in the last 5 years, I've been aware of this conversation really, creating a bit of a furore and sort of an excitement, really. But it's bloody new.
Yeah, well, I think the UK was ahead of the US, actually. Yeah, I think that, certainly when I started circling around it and making jokes about it and on my Instagram feed and then creating the company, I knew that there were people talking about it in the UK for sure, and which was I was looking to them. And Mariella Frostrup, a friend of mine who wrote Cracking the Menopause, her book came to me, The Galley, I think it was, right when I was in the midst of creating this company. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing this thing too. And but she'd already made the documentary. So yeah, I think you guys were already doing a lot better in terms of research and community building.
Yeah, I mean, it's all too late in the day. Like what I discovered from your book, which again I found mind-blowing, is that the term menopause was only coined in 1812. So before that, nothing, just women getting on with it and suffering and feeling like shit. And then perimenopause.
Yeah, or worse, being sent, sorry to interrupt, worse than that, like if you Google the history of menopause back to when, that phrase, that word was created, in Grecian times, menses is a Greek word. It was, they didn't know what to do with you. Once your, reproductive organs were no longer in use, you were going to be sent off to the asylum or something. You were considered, wacko. And there's just no use for a woman in society like that if she's going to suddenly not be able to produce and she's behaving in ways that are mysterious.
Mysterious.
Can you imagine?
I mean,
yes,
it's utterly absurd. But you can see that there is a flavour of that still in the air in terms of older women being less seen, less heard, less valued. We're not being sent off to asylums, but there is still
Asylums,
there's a
yeah.
flavour of that we are less
There's
important and less valued in society at a certain point.
Yeah, it's ingrained. It's a patriarchal thing that still is there, and up to us, I think, to really break that down. And I think we've done a bloody good job in this generation. And it's, like you say, been the last 5 years that change has ignited, and I think it will continue. Menopause is not going away. We can advocate for ourselves now, and demand for better care.
Yeah, and also I guess really honour it. Do you know what was so interesting? So very recently we had an incredible guest on the podcast called Afua Hirsch. She's an amazing activist, writer, speaker, and she's written a book called Decolonising My Body. There's a whole chapter on there, or maybe even chapters on the menstrual cycle and the fact that first of all, we don't talk about it enough when we start puberty, but then we don't learn to honour them. We just see them as this huge inconvenience that we have to keep all secret and don't tell anyone and hide the tampon, and it's all really clandestine. And then when we get to menopause and then we don't have them anymore, we're so full of grief because we haven't realised the importance of them or how amazing they are. We've just seen them as this bloody awful inconvenience for 3 or 4 decades, whatever it is. And it's actually about going right back to the start of puberty and teaching young girls this is an amazing natural phenomenon that you get to be part of until however old you are. And I think that's the bit that we're missing, is sort of seeing, and they can be an inconvenience and they can be painful, and we know all of that, but there is a beauty to it that we're not looking at maybe.
Yeah, it's part of your identity. You prepare for it, you live with it, you share it. It runs interference. It's just so much of who you are, because as you say, it's 3+ decades. But and I think this is why menopause, the education around it, should really start in the classroom in 5th or 6th grade, when you do sex ed, and say this is the beginning of your years as a hormonal woman, and this is what can happen in between, fertility and STDs and all of those things that will take place. And then the bookend of that is when your eggs are no longer there, and on the tails of that you will experience a hormonal shift, and just so that you know to prepare. And I think one of the big reasons for doing the book and the company and being part of the advocacy world for me is that we should know that after 35, you're probably going to experience some peri-menopausal symptoms. And I didn't know that. I did know that fertility slows down, but I didn't know that experiences and symptoms are going to affect you as early as that. And it's not the experience for everyone, but it is more common than you think. And I know people talk about the average age being 51. Well, averages are strange because, and also menopause is not a one size fits all. It's such a hard thing to actually determine what that menopause day is, because you can have a period, lose your period, and then not have it for 6 months, and you think this is it, and then suddenly it comes back again. But really, the definition, the one test, is the last period you had, and a year on from that. That is when you are officially in menopause. Any blood work can change, from day to day, so they're not, convinced that is enough certainty. So, yeah.
I mean, talk to me about
We just need more education.
We do. I mean, talk to me about the I'm sure, immense confusion you had when your doctor told you these are early signs of perimenopause or menopause as you're going through a fertility journey, because that's the last thing you want to hear in that moment when you're trying to have a baby and then you're faced with, oh my God, I thought I was at the start of this creating babies
Yes.
and getting pregnant, but now I'm talking about the end. How did you mentally navigate that?
Yeah, the collision of those two bits of information coming at once. Like he was in my mind telling me I was a grandmother and I was trying to be a mother. I'm like, what? You know? But anyway, that is ridiculous, and me playing tricks and self-loathing tricks on me, on myself. So yeah, I was what's called peri-menopausal, but that word was not given to me. I had never heard it until the last sort of few years, actually, and that would have been a much nicer, kinder word to have heard. I tried every version of getting pregnant, and none of them were working. For a couple of years, I wasn't a candidate for IVF. I tried Clomid. I tried IUIs. You know, put my legs in the air and did temperature checks, peed on a million yeah, like all of it, and nothing was working. I was so desperate to be a mom. I was turning in on myself with shame, thinking I was, broken, and because I couldn't reproduce naturally, and it was a horrible, horrible time. And but I did it to myself. It was nothing more than that. But eventually, I found a fantastic book called Inconceivable. And this woman had the same thing as me, which is a high FSH level, follicle stimulating hormone. And she changed her diet. And I did a lot of what she was saying. But that book was kind of my savior. And I remember being tied to that book for the hope, for the possibility that her story could become my story. And again, that is another reason why I wrote this book, because I wanted to provide some sense of hope, and through information, through other women's stories, my own, with all the gory details, and with some humor.
Yeah, with a lot of humor, which is greatly appreciated. You've written a very funny book. And I think it is so important to team stats, facts, deep dive research with stories. Storytelling is so important. And I think at times when you feel hopeless, hearing about someone else's journey, whether it's fertility or other hormone issues or perimenopause, menopause, it gives you hope that you don't have to hear one thing from a doctor and go, I'm fucked. That's it. That's me done. To hear hopeful stories is it's integral, I think, actually.
Absolutely. And there's lots of great menopause books out there written by doctors who are highly, highly informed in this specific area. And I've read many of them, and they have been so incredibly helpful for me. But this was important to me because it needs to be accessible. It needs to be something that you can follow along through my story as well as other women. And I think, storytelling is the thing that will not only remove the stigma but create change. I think ultimately, if we have to be open and share and just own our stories, it's such a release.
It
as well
is.
as productive.
Yeah, I think the and you've been extremely generous in sharing all sorts of stories in here, which I think is the most impactful way to completely annihilate shame. And you've written a whole chapter on shame in the book, and so many issues that women face create shame. I'm pretty sure everyone listening to this now at some point will have been drowning in shame. I've talked about it probably too much on this podcast, that I've had whole chunks of my life ruined by feeling just such shame. And as soon as you read someone else's story and go, oh, it's not just me, there's other people out there that have mentally lost so much time ruminating on things, or feel physically like there's something wrong with them. It has the power just to dissipate shame, that level of storytelling. So it's so important.
Yeah, the most healing thing in life is to feel part of a community, to feel healed by not being alone. We're not supposed to be alone. And having our stories reflected is or my passion. It's what I do as an actor up on the screen. Even though I'm telling someone else's story, it's hopefully bringing people into the cinema or on TV, and reflecting pieces of their stories. And that's all I've ever wanted to do. It matters to me. It really does. And yeah,
Best chapter name?
that's it.
Badge of Honor. Well done.
Well, I can tell you that's also a product name, Badge of Honor,
Oh, you got it handy.
which is just happen to have it right there beside my bed. That is not lube though. That is vaginal moisturizer.
Lovely.
That we created for in Stripes Beauty, which is the company I was talking about. I created for women of this category so they can feel well hydrated from scalp to vag. And yeah, that there's a few things that take place that are very personal in that particular chapter. Certainly I didn't expect that I would be going through menopause and entering into a new relationship at the same time.
Yes. I mean, that is something that you don't necessarily expect, but something that I guess has its own challenges separate to, being a teenager or 20-something and falling in love and lust and all of that stuff. It's a completely different ballgame. I think there are huge pluses because you've got more wisdom and experience and perhaps have the ability to speak your mind more freely. But, of course, going through menopause, having had children, meeting someone new, you've got to have sex with them for the first time. It's a huge deal.
Yes, it is. Yes, and I the story is in the book. I won't go into great detail about it, but yeah, it was incredibly awkward, humiliating, and mercifully, I was with a man who was not only not squeamish, but incredibly compassionate, and I was able to just tell him the truth of what was going on, and he was the response couldn't have been better. He just said, "How can I help?" And instantly comforting me and making me feel safe and extra horny.
Yes. Yes. I love it.
And someone's that, like
When they're nice.
just
It's the best.
there for you. Yeah.
It's the best. Do you know what I love? When I read this line in the book, I was like, you say, I didn't know this is about Billy, your husband. I didn't know he would be the person. I didn't know he'd be the person that I belonged with. Ah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because you'd worked together completely platonically,
Yes.
nothing going on. And then a light switch went on and it was like, oh, you're my person.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think we'd spent months creating a good relationship at work and then a friendship. And then the sparks came and love, just really good. But we moved very, very slowly because I really didn't feel in good enough shape as having just recently split up to be open to love and creating a relationship. I wanted to keep my head down on work and obviously on my kids and so it took me by surprise, but we moved very, very slowly and people didn't even know about it until quite a few years in.
You're also the fittest couple ever. It's just like, you're too gorgeous. It's too much. It's like blinding. It's too much.
Oh, thank you.
Another thing that is, again, probably not talked about enough when it comes to menopause is the mental health side of it. Anxiety and depression, two things that so many women will have to deal with. And Dr. Vora in your book states that psychiatric medicine aimed at serotonin is barking up completely the wrong tree. And I'm sure many women out there will have been either offered antidepressants or actually it would have been completely dismissed and not looked at all. But in the book, you do give solutions and ways that we can look at our mental health when we're looking at menopause and ways that we can help ourselves. What was your experience sort of mentally? Would you say anxiety was more of a problem, low mood? What hit you?
Yeah, anxiety. And I think if you're not sleeping, that can lead to so many problems during this time. I mean, anyone can say that. A man can say that. A teenager, you're just never going to be on top of your game when you're not sleeping. But as a woman in peri or menopause, you are going to experience a whole litany of other. It's going to lead to a whole lot of other things like anxiety, depression, memory blips, in the most inconvenient ways. You could be standing in front of, a boardroom of men holding a meeting, and suddenly you've lost the word or the sentence is gone. Or, it happens to me, and I say one in my book of just trying to remember a name of a show. I'd literally just walked from the set, and I cannot believe this is happening. It's very humiliating and can create a whole lot of anxiety. And so there are many ways to find treatment for that. I find personally, for me, sleep, obviously, and that meant going on HRT to help my sleep and not deal with those disruptions. But also, and it's safe for me. I realize it's not everyone's choice, and we're not safe necessarily for everyone. But you have to get educated on that if it is right for you. But I also exercise is a big one for me. It really is not just for nice lean muscles and, I don't exercise to be skinny. I exercise to be strong, and I exercise to get my mind right.
Yeah. I mean, sleep I mean, I've had the shittest week of sleep ever. My son was ill, then he was waking me up Monday, and then my daughter caught whatever it was. So she was in the bed with me and she was puking, and it was just, and then
Oh
having night
God, yeah.
terrors because they've got fevers. I've literally had the shittest week of sleep. And today,
Oh,
my
I'm
daughter
sorry.
was still off school, and she wanted to watch Wicked, the film. So we started watching that. Before I knew it, I was asleep, blacked out on the sofa. I woke up feeling so groggy and shit. And it affects every bit of you. You end up then eating more junk because you're trying to energize yourself, and everything gets out of whack. It's so tricky. What do you think has helped your sleep and getting into a good routine of it?
Well, how I wind down at the end of the day is important. I try not to eat. I eat like with the kids at 6. I don't want to eat at 8 o'clock at night anymore. Yeah. And I definitely don't drink in the middle of the week. I do like my glass of wine. I mean, I generally will sleep so much better if I don't have wine, so I try to avoid it. But if I go out to dinner or something with a group of people at the end of the week, or if I'm cooking with friends, or then I will have it. And I really try to have a bath at the end of every day, and it really is my wind down. So you kind of are setting the tone for that. Um, and if I'm in really, like, I've already had too many nights in a row where I haven't had done well, I will take something if I need to, whether that's a Benadryl or we use Tylenol PM. I think you have something else over there. Um, but I don't like using stronger sleep aids if I can avoid it. But yeah, those are and exercise again. It tires you out. It really does help with sleep.
It's the best. And then when it comes to anxiety, I mean, again, I've actually had pretty, like not much anxiety at all in the last year, but I had years again ruled by it in quite extreme ways. I couldn't drive on the motorway and all sorts of things that felt very disruptive. And that used to create a bit of a cycle again then of sort of self-loathing and self-questioning. And actually, I think one of the most important things is to really be nice to yourself and let yourself off the hook and stop
Yes.
beating yourself up when things are a bit of a mess or when you haven't been on your A game that day. Are you pretty good at being compassionate to yourself?
Takes a little bit of time sometimes, and I might have to fall on my face before I get that. I try to drive through things. I've got a lot of resilience. And that has been helpful. A lot of different points in my life, but sometimes it's like, no, your body or, everything's trying to tell you, just slow down. But when I do fall on my face, I find the best thing to do if you're doing it in front of someone is just call it out. Call it out and say, identify it, name it, and share it, and just say, this is what's going on with me. Forgive me. I need to take a moment.
Yeah, that's the best way, because actually, as we all know, shame breeds in secrecy. So if you're then keeping all of that in, you've got shame coming into the picture as well, and it's just toxic. It's the pits.
Yeah,
Well,
it just snowballs.
You mentioned a moment ago HRT, and again, this was a section that I really read thoroughly because it's an oversaturated arena when it comes to looking at hormone therapy and what to do, what not to do. There's misinformation out there. It's a shit show, actually. And a lot of it, you explain in the book, is down to...
And it's still going.
And it's still going.
Even since the writing of this book, which I did. I am glad you read it thoroughly. And I went over this again and again and again. And we moved things around. We really fact checked in so many different areas with different doctors and different places. And still, this is an evolving conversation because the research has only really got going since the bad study that took place that put the fear of God and made everyone flush their hormones down the toilet, scared women, scared doctors. The hangover from that is so substantial, and a generation of women really went untreated largely, and it's only just started now where women are feeling and doctors are feeling okay about taking them again. And it requires you going into your doctor's office with as much information as you can gather, and there's lots of great information on the internet, great articles. There was one in the New York Times a couple of years ago called Women Have Been Misled. And I've spoken to all of these doctors who are giving the current stats and the current research. But again, some people now are saying that HRT is not as beneficial as all of the things that people have listed over the years. So it's like, I wish there was a perfect alignment within the medical system so that we could at least feel less confusion. But I would say take your time and research it yourself. Find a doctor that you trust and ask the questions, talk about your symptoms, know that there is risk and benefit to every single medication you take. And talk about your medical history and symptoms. Those are the most important things, and then work it through. It's just the worst thing is when your doctor is going to gatekeep you, not just from the medicine, but from the conversation. That's not okay. If you can't get a doctor to at least entertain the conversation and say, this is what I believe, then that might be grounds to, seek another doctor.
But again, bonkers that we have to go through this, that this is something we have to sort of almost battle through and do extensive research on, when it's going to happen to all of us and no one really has the answer. And like you say, it's bespoke. It depends on your medical history, on your family's medical history, on your symptoms and
your symptoms. Yeah.
I mean, that's the bit that's a head fuck for me. It's just knowing what do you do? But I think you're so right. It's asking questions, isn't it? Getting as much information as you can to then ensure that your answer is based on the data that matches you.
You have to do the research yourself based on everything that you're going through. And
the other subject that I love that you've dived into is just aging in general. And you've still got 2 grandmothers alive.
Sadly.
Oh no, since writing the book.
They both passed away since writing the book.
No.
Yeah. They both went within months of each other.
Oh.
And but one lived to 99, my mum's mum, and my dad's mum lived to 101.
It's extraordinary.
So we're living longer. We
I know,
really
but
are
I
living
mean,
longer.
what amazing women and amazing ages. And I'm so sorry to they've both passed since you've written the book. What would you say you learned from those women who were, I mean, one of them having lived on the planet for over a century? What lesson did you learn from them?
Yeah. I knew my mum's mum much better. In fact, she raised us for a period of time. Um, and her work ethic was the thing that I take away from her, and great humor. She 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 was Australian, and we call, Aussie battler. She had a mouth on her, and she was like, "Get off your dingo and get something done." Like, if you dared to have a book in your hand, you had to go and get off your ass and go and clean out the goats or the goat's pen, or get the chicken's eggs, or like, she was not going to have anyone sitting around. And so I, as a result, and my brother, both workaholics, I would say, we work hard. And But that's great too. We take it seriously. Yeah.
And to end our chat, which I've loved every minute of, I would love to know, Naomi, where is your happy place?
My happy place is home with the kids and Billy, and playing a game of cards, bananagrams, eating good
Love
food.
bananagrams, big fan.
Yeah, and there's another game that I think was invented in the UK, but apparently no longer available, called Snatch. And it's like just a more not a snatch like that one down there.
It's very appropriate.
But yeah, on brand for me. So no, Snatch it's another version of bananagrams. It's a
Oh.
word game, but it gets aggressive and highly competitive, and you steal someone's word, and it's very fun. But I'm told it's no longer available. So
I'll do some Googling for
don't
you.
know
I'll
why.
have a look into it. I just want to say the biggest thank you for being on Happy Place. What a bloody pleasure. And again, a massive congrats on, dare I say it, the most awesome book that every woman needs to read. Thank you so much, Naomi Watts.
Thank you, Fearne, for having me.